Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever it is for you. For me, it's just past midnight on Sunday, September the 15th, 2024. And this is not a normal live at 5. I don't have any news prepared. It's more of a Saturday coffee clatch where we'll be talking to folks and taking questions. Hey, Kevin. And peeps are starting to come in. Hey, Clay. Hey, Vanetta. Hey, Richard Hansen. Hey, Mel. How's everybody doing tonight? Hey, Mad Mike. So this is not going to be a normal live at 5, guys. It's more of a Saturday coffee clatch, a bull session, a chat session, if you will. And in that vein, we won't do the normal sponsorship. Instead, I want to give a big shout out to everybody who helped get me to Odessa and to Kyiv. And there were a lot of people there. So let's give a big shout out. If you see any of these people around, thank them, please. Tom Bates, M. Fuller, Leo Ring, Roy Daniels, Chris Carter, Fitz and Denver. That's Dark Irish and his beautiful Dalmatian Denver. Ballerina, Eli, Robert Pauley, Blue Ariel Silk, and David Tomlinson. These guys are the best, man. And I really appreciate all that support. It was traveling a little bit around Ukraine has been an eye-opening experience for me. The Odessa and Kharkiv and Kyiv have suffered very differently through this conflict. And I hope that I was able to bring some of that to you in those videos from those places. And so big thanks to everybody who helped get me there. Again, this is not going to be a normal live at 5. The floor is open for questions, comments, points of observation, and personal need. It'll be more of a bull session, Q&A. Oh, Robert Stewart Key, you're Robert Pauley. I think I texted you asking for your handle, but okay, I'm going to just make a note of that. So thank you, Robert. I couldn't have done any of that without you guys, right? I mean, literally, it's a community effort here to get any of this shit done. I know what the word literally means, and I literally could not do it without you. And so I'm very grateful. I wasn't going to do a live tonight. It's Saturday. We don't normally do lives on Saturday. But Anthony Tommy Tom sent me a very frustrated message today. He was like, Peter, how come Keir Starmer and Biden met yesterday, but we still don't have any green light on long-range missile strikes into Russia? And over this past week, I repeatedly suggested to people that we should not expect a big announcement on Friday, right? That the people I listen to, people like General Michael Clark, people like General Ben Hodges, other analysts who are Russia watchers, had suggested we would not be hearing a big announcement on Friday, and I did try to prepare folks for that. And I think what's happening is this, that when Blinken came to Kyiv this week, Ukraine got the green light. I believe they did. And right now they are planning the missions. They are selecting the targets. They are readying the weapons. Why would I think this? The Russians have pulled 95% of their aircraft back out of ATACMS range. And that, to me, says that the Russians know it's coming. Now, the good news is that there are a lot of assets in that 300-kilometer range that they can't move. Oil depots are not portable. Logistics hubs can't be moved. The rails are there, right? and they're not going anywhere. Logistics hubs, supply lines, oil depots, fuel depots, ammunition depots. Those are not easily moved 300 kilometers back to another air base, unlike the planes. And so I think that what is happening, right? And Anthony, what we're talking about is the question you had today in text. What I believe has happened is that the Ukrainians have the green light. They are planning the missions. And when those missiles fly, Macron and Starmer and Biden, they'll all make speeches that day talking about how they gave authorization for those. You might want a big announcement, Chris Crouch, but I don't think you're going to get it, right? I think we're going to see the missiles fly, we're going to see the targets hit, and only then will the West acknowledge that authorization was given. That's my fond hope. Now, I don't know that to be true, but looking at all the signaling that we're getting from all of the people in positions of power, and more importantly, the fact that we know the Russians have pulled those planes back, that says more than anything, because the Russians know what's going on. Just like last year, the Russians had all the counteroffensive plans because our Western democracies are riddled with Russian agents who are happy to sell us out for cash, right? Ooh, I got a copy of the Ukrainian plans. Let me sell them to the Russians. Ugh. We are so in bed with the Russians, and they have infiltrated our Western democracies so insidiously that, the Ukrainians shouldn't trust us with anything because we're full of leaks. Happy Saturday, Neil. How you doing? Right, Bernard. Right, they're fans at keeping us wondering. Right, let's keep them wondering for a while. Right, Bobby? The leaders of the U.S. and the U.K. don't just get together over nothing. They don't get together for crumpets and tea. Okay, so that was the big thing that kind of prompted me to get online on a Saturday night. Hey, cool. What's going on with all of you? What's going on with all of you? Or what other things are bothering us? What other questions do we have? Yeah, Jack, I don't think that we have to take out Putin. I have confidence that somebody inside of Russia is going to take out Putin. I think Putin's fate is already written, and it's the same fate as so many other dictators and autocrats before him. And it's tick-tock, tick-tock. What happens with this if Harris wins in November? It's a good question. I'm doing okay, Darlene. Thanks. What happens with Harris? Harris is a woman who has to prove herself on a stage, a world stage dominated by men. And so it occurs to me that she is likely to take a harder line than the Biden administration has. I think she's likely to take less shit from Putin. I think she's much more likely to pull triggers sooner. I think that we're going to see under the Harris administration either no significant policy changes or a ramping up of support for Ukraine. That's my fondest hope, is that she is even more committed to the cause of democracy and more willing to take the risks. Well, Neil, the good news is that I think Donald Trump is done. I don't think he has a snowball's chance in hell. I don't believe for a second that Trump has a snowball's chance in hell. We already know what his plan is for Ukraine. His plan is to have them surrender. J.D. Vance just said it the other day. He was like, freeze the conflict where it is, hold the front line where it is, everybody keeps what they have, and Ukraine must never join NATO. That's insanity. That's just rewarding a genocidal lunatic for his bad behavior. What about more Ukrainian-made weaponry? Is that possible and even cheaper than U.S.-made? Not only, I mean, the labor costs are far less to produce things here in Ukraine. So yes, it's bound to be cheaper. I think that's a non-starter. That's true. That's just true. However, much more importantly than the cost and the economic benefits to Ukraine for evolving its own defense industry, there is none of this bullshit of micromanagement from DC. If they make the weapons, they can use them how they like. And that, to me, is the greatest benefit. That's the greatest benefit to homegrown defensive capabilities here. Jason 420, oh, nice handle. The war will be over in a few months when Harris wins. Putin is holding off to see if Trump wins. You are not wrong about that. You are not wrong about that. And he's trying to get every centimeter of ground that he can in the meantime. Because he thinks that if Trump wins, that plan of J.D. Vance's is what he'll get, right? The line will be frozen. He'll get to keep everything he's got, and Ukraine will never join NATO. Those two things are not going to happen. Ukraine will be in NATO. Ukraine will be in the EU. And I can't see them giving up the temporarily occupied territories. I can't see it. Has UN sent North Korea... Oh, has Kim Jong-un, not UN. I see. Hugh, there are North Koreans working, and to call them slaves is not far off. I don't think you're wrong. There are North Koreans working in Russia. I don't know the details of that or what they've got them doing. But as I understand it, there have been new barracks built at an air base in the far east of the country that's associated with an industrial zone out there. And it is thought that they are housing North Korean laborers there to help make up for the bad labor shortage that Russia's experiencing right now, right? Russia's short something like 4.3 million workers. Because the birth rate has been so low for so long and so many people have immigrated out of the country, it's a real problem for them. Hey, Pedro the Amigo. Webadeb, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. Will Ukraine eventually allow dual citizenship? So like so much of the former Soviet Union, there is a kind of... prejudice against the notion of dual citizenship. For us in the United States, it's a very normal thing because we embrace the idea of multiple identities. You know, I am both an American and, that's my nationality. And then my ethnicity is, a mishmash of Eastern European and Central European nationalities, right? With a Belarusian last name, just by coincidence more than anything else. So we embrace this notion of multiple identities and dual citizenship and kind of split loyalties. Not a big fan of that in Eastern Europe. They're not. And so it does seem a little backward and parochial to us. We'll see what happens. That's up to Ukraine. We all have to be careful about inviting Russian citizens in, Bobby. It's a problem. It's a problem for us in the U.S. You know, Trump is worried about what immigrants come in. It's the Russian immigrants we ought to be worried about, because that's just loaded with FSB agents, sleeper cells, etc. No, you can't trust them. You can't. You're a fool to. Okay, so here's a common lie that the trolls tell, right? This guy here who doesn't have a name, and undoubtedly that's a stolen picture. Ukraine people are abducted off the street, conscripted soldiers. Ukraine is losing badly. Now, none of that is true, right? It's an uphill fight. I can't say that Ukraine is winning, but one could certainly not say that Russia is winning. No way in hell. Now, as they eat your pets, you know what? If anybody is eating the neighbor's pets, it's Russian immigrants. I'd put money on that. American money, not Rivna. And this notion of people being abducted off the street, here's what I'll say to that. There is intense fear among the population that of military age, that they will be abducted off the street. I have met people who do not leave their homes. I mean, they really, except to go to the grocery store, go around the corner of the chemist, right? They do not leave their homes. They are hiding from those people that will abduct them, throw them in a van, and have them on the front line in 2 days. They really believe that it's a true thing. I can find zero evidence of it, and I have looked. I'm on the streets of Kyiv every day. There's young men walking up and down the streets of conscription age. I have never once seen anybody hurled into a van. Nobody I know has ever seen it. Nobody I know knows anybody to whom it has happened. And I've talked to kids. My buddy Serge is right there. He's just about 30. And everybody he knows, everybody he went to school with, is a prime candidate for this. They're all of conscription age. He doesn't know anybody that it's happened to either. He doesn't know anybody who can tell him a verifiable story of it happening to somebody that they knew in common. So I can't say for certain that it doesn't happen, but I have yet to find any evidence of it here in this country. Those videos that you see, because I've seen those videos online too, every one of them that I have spent any time trying to find out what was going on in that video, it was debunked. It was either a legitimate criminal who was being arrested by the police for some criminal activity, or it was a draft dodger, somebody who had been issued a conscription order and was hiding from it. That's a real thing. But this idea of people just being dragged in off the street, no, I have no evidence that that is true. Yeah, Neil says, Russia was expected to have full control of Ukraine by now. How wrong was they to keep going in Ukraine? So wrong. The whole thing was a mess from the beginning. Do I place any credence that Putin wants a ceasefire on energy infrastructure? Putin wants a ceasefire, period, Bobby. He wants to freeze this conflict where it is. He knows that he's fucked and he needs time to regroup. And he's not going to get it. It's important now to press harder. Now is the time to press. And that's exactly what the Ukrainians are doing in Kursk. Yeah, Walter, I'm not really doing Saturday Lives anymore, but I took Wednesday off because it was 9/11. I don't like to do anything on 9/11. And for the last 23 years, if I could avoid doing anything on 9/11, I did. And so tonight, I was talking earlier to Anthony Tommy Tom, and some things came up. And I thought I'd just hop on and see if anybody wanted to talk about anything. Pedro, it's a riot, isn't it? Russia is struggling so hard with Ukraine, losing badly, in my opinion, given that they had every advantage at the beginning. And they still dare to saber rattle at NATO. It's ridiculous. They are completely disconnected from reality. If you watch Russian state TV, boy, the shit that comes out of these guys' mouths, they are living in an alternate reality. Absolutely living in an alternate reality. Cheyenne just posted the link to the letters to Congress. I encourage any Americans in here to reach out to your Congress people, reach out to your senators, reach out to the White House, push them for a no-fly zone west of the Dnipro. That's what we need. Look, if they're not going to deliver the Patriots they promised, the very least they could do is help shoot down the missiles. Neil says, do you think the British SAS are helping Ukraine? We know they are, right? We know that all the amphibious troops, all the Marines, have had SAS training in Great Britain. That's well known. These raids on Crimea are SAS operations. As I understand it, they all got their training there. TKS Daddy, I am in Kyiv, yep. And it's actually really nice out. I had taken a nap before and I had just cooked, and it is a small apartment. And so the oven does get it warm in here. That's what it is. I just had some sausages. What about report that UA government wants more and lots of video surveillance? I don't know anything about that. I don't know what that's about. I don't know anything about that. My guess is that it's just like modern CCTV, right? You cut down on local policing costs if you have video footage of everything. And people can get away with less when everybody's on video all the time. Shoigu and Putin are friends, Dusty. I don't know that Shoigu's ever going to face his wrath. He's taken a lot of heat for him. I don't know. Well, you can't enforce a no-fly zone over Russia, right? Like, that would be a declaration of war. That's Russian airspace. They're not asking for help. They're not asking for a no-fly zone. For the West to impose a no-fly zone over Russian airspace would be a declaration of war. But the Ukrainians want it. So on this side of things, it would be welcomed. What's the river water quality like these days? I don't know the answer to that, Walter. If you're talking about the Dnipro, I don't know what the Dnipro's water quality is like normally. There was a weird thing that happened last week. A whole bunch of fish were found dead in the upper reaches of the Dnipro up by the Kyiv Dam, the hydroelectric plant. And there was some talk, some suspicion that maybe there had been an attempt to poison the water supply. But I didn't see any follow-up to that. It's possible that that kill-off was just from the Russian missile strike on the dam, on the reservoir, and that what we were seeing were the fish that were killed in that missile strike. You know why the Russians hit the reservoir with a missile, right? They heard that fish swim in schools, and they had hit all the other schools in the area. That's a Peter Alexievich original. I'm here through Thursday. Tip your waiters, try the veal. Well, Jacko, anybody that wants to fight is fighting. With a few exceptions. Now, okay, there's this one kid, I know, Igor, who had a medical condition that prevented him from getting into the service when the war first started. However, they changed the laws. And so now if you have, I don't want to say anything because then you'll think that that's the disease that he had or the problem that he had. And it's not. But let's say an arrhythmia, right? Let's say you have a heart arrhythmia, which previously would have kept you out of the armed services. Today you can get in with it. And it was a similar thing like that this kid had. And as soon as they changed the law, he went down the conscription office, signed right up, and he's off now. God bless him. So pretty much anybody that wants to be in the army is in it. The other guys that I know that are of conscription age that have not signed up themselves, they are mostly resigned to the idea that if they are called up, they will go. If they are needed, if they are called up, they will go. With varying levels of concern over that. Then there are those who just do not want to go, who are making plans to dress as women and cross the border. And that's a real thing. Or who are hiding in their apartments and refuse to leave rather than face their responsibility. You know, you're going to have some of that everywhere. You're going to have some of that everywhere. And here it's particularly difficult because it's like in some ways it is like the American Civil War. There are such deep and abiding ties of history, language, culture, and blood between Russia and Ukraine that many folks are of two minds. I told you the story of my buddy Yarrow, whose aunt was going to leave him her apartment in Odessa until he joined the army. When he joined the army, she wrote him out of the will because how dare he fight against Mother Russia? I mean, what do you do with that? What do you do with that? So according to Zelensky, he now has 10 new battalions, which is a lot of guys, like 20,000 guys, 25,000 guys, something like that, that he doesn't have enough equipment for. He's got the men, but he can't equip them. That seems to be the big problem here in Ukraine. Oh, Bobby, are you talking about 9/11? Because Bobby wrote here, on a personal note, Pete, was very traumatic for you. You were there. Any comments? I was there. I was in World Trade II about 20 minutes before the first plane hit because I was in World Trade II every single day. I took the PATH train from Jersey City every morning to World Trade II, and then I either switched to the E. The E? I guess it depends because the office moved. At one point, I was in One Penn Plaza, but by the time of 9/11, I was in the Grace Building at 42nd Street between 5th and 6th. And I feel like that was the NR. I think I took the NR uptown then. So every morning, walk down to Exchange Place, hop on the PATH, go to World Trade, hop on the NR, go to 42nd Street. Or go upstairs and walk to our office at 40 Broad Street. We had an office. I worked right next to Wall Street at 40 Broad, and which, if I am not mistaken, was owned by Donald Trump at the time. Believe it or not, he was our landlord. Anyway, I was not at the 40 Broad Street office that day, and I was eternally grateful for that, because it was probably about 2 o'clock in the afternoon when the kind of refugees from 40 Broad Street made it to the 42nd Street office. And they were a disaster. They were covered in head to toe in that toxic dust, that concrete, steel, and glass mess. And for the most part, that day was spent trying to figure out how the fuck to get off Manhattan Island and get home. My wife at the time was home in our apartment in Jersey City. She was up on the roof with some of the neighbors, and she was videotaping the towers burning. And I'll never forget it, that when you watch her tape, you see the first tower collapse. And the very first words you hear from one of the neighbors was, "What about all the firemen?" Like, that was the first thing people thought of, were the 340 odd firemen that were in that building, who nobody would ever see again. We spent several days down at the ferry terminal, just loading supplies onto ships to go to Ground Zero. All these tractor trailers kept showing up. All this water and granola and chocolate bars, whatever, Gatorade, lots of Gatorade. And we just spent days down there just loading them on the barges and running. We had a car at the time, and we ran like a taxi service for the welders. We gave them rides. They would park over at Pavonian Newport Mall, and then we would give them rides to the ferry station, or if they were coming off a shift. Because welders and iron workers came from everywhere. And they went to Ground Zero, and they tried to cut the beams open during the first week, and when it was still a rescue operation. And we tried to help with that too. And the overwhelming sense that so many of us had at the time was a sense of helplessness, of powerlessness. And that sense of powerlessness and of helplessness led us to try to do whatever we could. And for us, we lived right there near the ferry terminal. It was an easy thing to go and load the boats with supplies. We lived right there and had a car. It was an easy thing to run welders back and forth from Pavonia to the ferry. When this war started, when the full-scale invasion happened, I felt that same sense of powerlessness. I felt that same sense of the huge world event spinning out of control, and there was nothing I could do about it. And it was very much that sense that I was bound and determined to do something that led me here. And I try to do whatever little things I can do. And I hope that it's of some value. Yep, Webadeb. I don't feel like I'm doing very much. There is so much to be done. And I have a lot of skills that I am not making use of. But we do what we can. And right now, this is what I can do. Maddie Wright had friends down there at Ground Zero working, firemen and regular people. A lot of people didn't think they were getting off the island that day. You know, Julian, everybody remembers Dunkirk, right? World War II, the story of, oh gosh, I want to say it was like what, 350,000 troops maybe? And the boats that got them from France to England took 9 days, right? 9 days to move over 300,000 troops from France to England. Dunkirk. When Lower Manhattan was cut off from the rest of the world by the collapse of the Trade Center, and it was cut off, make no mistake, the mess that was made when those towers came down, the toxic air, the dust, the vaporized iron, steel, concrete, and glass that you were breathing in. When Lower Manhattan was cut off, there was 500,000 people trapped downtown. Every boat that could float ran to Lower Manhattan to try to get people off the island. They moved in 9 hours. 500,000 people, more than in the Dunkirk evacuation. And they did it not in 9 days, in 9 hours. Unbelievable. Just unbelievable. So Maddie Wright says, who started these crazy conspiracy theories that it was the U.S.? I don't know who started them, Maddie, but I guarantee you I know who amplified them, who made them mainstream. The people who benefit from undermining Americans' faith in their own government. The Russians. I worked close to our local airport. I remember jet after jet coming in low and fast. What I remember most from that time, Walter, is in the weeks after there being no air traffic over Manhattan, except for F-16s, F-35s, and the occasional stealth fighter. I remember black as a bat, a stealth fighter flying right up the Hudson, lower than the Mercantile Exchange. Like it was at an altitude where if you were in your office on the 45th floor of the Mercantile Exchange, you'd be eye to eye with the pilot looking out the window. Crazy. Webadeb was working in San Francisco and Googled World Trade 1, and there was a direct video of smoke. I'll never forget. I mean, so I'm in World Trade 2. I get my train. I go uptown. I get out at 42nd Street. And in the court, I must have been like one of the last subways out of World Trade. Because I get to 42nd Street and Avenue of the Americas. I come upstairs right there on the corner of Bryant Park. And everybody is stopped. Like, you come out of the subway, normally everything's a mass of movement, right? There's no cars on the street. The street's already shut down. Everybody is standing stock still, looking down Avenue of the Americas. And you can see the tower, right? Because you could see the towers at the end of the street. And one of them is burning. Holy shit. I'll never forget it. It's burned in my memory. Not an hour and a half later, I would be standing stock still in the middle of the street, looking down 6th Avenue at only one tower burning. And just a mass of dust and smoke trundling its way up 6th Avenue toward the rest of us in what was an otherwise gorgeous autumn day. Gorgeous day. I mean, Maddie, there is zero evidence that anything happened but the official story, that a couple of terrorists flew a couple of planes into the buildings. There is zero evidence of anything else happening. It's crazy that people believe that shit. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. Right, Julian? Remember that? Trump was bragging that he now had the largest building on the New York skyline. And he saw it as an opportunity to make money. Which it was. Legitimately. Right? People who kept their heads, who shorted airline stocks, who bought property at the low point, they made money. That is not the thing to be thinking of in times of a national crisis. Neil was watching it unfold on TV in the UK. Black SUVs with blue lights on the Sawmill Parkway. Oh, we all did, Maddie. We all lost people that day. Camping in Cornwall, heard it on the radio, watching it on the prison TV. It's a diversity of experience. Yeah, it was a hell of a day. The fallout was, I don't know, I probably can't say this on here. That's the 4th plane, Neil. Shanksville was the 4th plane. Don't forget the Pentagon. I would think that trip to Oak Ridge was cut short. Like, it is, right? 9/11 is like the Kennedy assassination for a new generation. Everybody remembers exactly where they were that day. I agree, Joy. Ukraine does need our support and help. You know, for everybody that bitches about NATO, remind them that the only time Article 5 was ever invoked was for us, was for the United States, on the day that the planes hit the Trade Center and the Pentagon and Shanksville. That is the one time that Article 5 was triggered, was the attack on the United States of America. And our allies were there for us, as well as our enemies. Remember, that's how Putin suckered Bush. He was the first one to call and say, anything you need, I am with you, America. Putin used that tragedy to gain favor and make himself appear to be a friend. And now here we are 23 years later, and he is clearly not our friend. For 20 years, he's been waging a secret hybrid warfare against us. And it is about time that we stood up and did something about it. Even Castro offered to help. He might have. I don't know. Yeah, I remember the NSA director. I forget his name right now, but the reporting was that when he was told about 9/11, his response was, "Oh gosh, I hope it's not those guys at the flight training school in Florida." Or some shit. Like he knew exactly who it was. Like he knew exactly who it was. Because we were watching them, but not closely enough. Pearl Harbor, the Kennedy assassination, 9/11. These are the assassination of Martin Luther King, Bobby Kennedy. These are things. Ronald Reagan, the attempt on Ronald Reagan. I remember exactly where I was when they tried to shoot Reagan. Yeah. Well, listen, guys, it's 10 to 1 in the morning here, and I don't usually even do a live on Saturday. What about Trump being shot? You know, that was just 2 weeks ago, and I don't even remember that, or whenever it was. I don't care. Let me just mention again. I just want to give a big shout out to a bunch of people who I could not do this without, and who have been very helpful over the last couple weeks. Tom Bates, Marilyn Fuller, Leo Ring, Roy Daniels, Chris Carter, Dark Irish, and Denver, Ballerina Eli, Robert Stewart Key, Blue Ariel Silk, David Tomlinson, and Arne. I don't think I forgot anybody that was directly involved in sponsoring my recent travel, but if I did, hit me up. I apologize. I think that's the whole list. Really appreciate everything that those guys have done. Really appreciate the ongoing contributions of the moderator team, who I cannot thank enough. Cheyenne, Vanetta, PT, Jay, and Travis. Big thanks to Nightshade, who has the Peters Peeps group on the Book of Faces. Big thanks to Vanetta, who has the Google Doc share, where our letters to, especially now about the no-fly zone, are available for Congress, the Senate, and the White House. Big thanks to Lars, who has the Alexievich archive and the Discord server. And I think that's the whole team, right? Did I miss anybody? Hey, Robert Chapman. Thank you, Bernard. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Anthony. Questions, comments. We have a couple minutes left. Questions, comments, points of observation, or personal need. Anything from anybody? Hey, Clay. Be sure to get outside before bed. Webadeb, I don't know if you're aware, there's a curfew in this city. There's no going outside now. That's not a thing. Now, that's a funny story. I'll tell that story. Clay, if you're still here, you'll appreciate this. Because it is just a funny story of like American stupidity. When I came to Kyiv, I was so ignorant of what was going on, I didn't even know there was a curfew. Never even occurred to me, like to ask or find out or anything. Like, you know, it's wartime, right? And I didn't even think about, would there be a curfew? So I'm here, it's my first night in town, and curfew starts at midnight. At the time, it went until 6 a.m. Now it only goes until 5. And you know, you're in town, it's your first night in town, you just had all this travel. What do? You shower and you go out for a drink to relax, right? So I go out, I catch a cab to a bar that was recommended to me. I meet some people. We're there drinking. And all of a sudden, I look around. It's 10 minutes to midnight, and I am all alone, and the guy is throwing me out. And I'm like, oh, hey, seems awful early to me. I thought this was a major European capital. Shouldn't we be here a little longer? Nope, get out. Okay. So now it's midnight. There are no cabs. I'm 2 kilometers from my hotel. What do? I start walking. And I have to confess, I do not get drunk very often, but I was pretty drunk that night. And you guys know I am an actor, and I have the librettos to multiple Broadway shows in my head. I am all alone on Taras Shevchenko Boulevard, a major street in Kyiv, hiking the 2 kilometers back to my hotel. And I am singing Broadway show tunes because I am drunk and I am happy to be here. Like an idiot. Top of my lungs, Webadeb. Top of my lungs. I don't remember what I was singing. But there I am, walking down Broadway. I don't know, belting out Les Mis or Phantom of the Opera or Jesus Christ Superstar. Like, that's about my generation. Rent, it could have been Rent. The cops pull up. Of course they do, right? Because they're out looking to make quick fines, right? And they pull up and they ask for my ID. They see I just got into the country that day. They take pity on me. They throw me in the back of the squad car and they take me back to my hotel. So I didn't have to pay for a cab home. They did not hit me up for a bribe. They had the front desk explain to me what curfew was. And it was honestly a great interaction with the police. I was very happy and grateful to them for their understanding. Rocky Horror, I can do the entire Rocky Horror soundtrack. Michael Rennie was ill the day the earth stood still, and he told us where we stand. And Flash Gordon was there in silver underwear. Where's Fitz when you need him? Thanks, Robbo. Riff Raff Original. He wrote that, Pug and Mahone. He is the author, the guy who played Riff Raff in the film. Kariyama? I don't know what that means. It's called Kariyama. I don't know what that is. How do you remember all those lines? Practice, 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 Bobby. Practice, practice, practice. Plum wine. What is that? That's sake, right? No, that's rice wine. I don't... yeah, I don't drink plum wine. Not on purpose, anyway. How many times did Putin threaten nukes this week? Hardly at all, Clay. Now, actually, Putin, he made threats, but I don't know that he threatened nukes, per se. The nuclear rhetoric is toning down. It is toning down. I watched a couple episodes of Solyov this week, and hardly any threats against Berlin or Lisbon or Paris, hardly any nuclear threats. And I think it's because they know that it doesn't, they're starting to get the message that it's not going to work. And they can't do anything about it. And I would highlight to everybody Hamish de Breton Gordon, who's a brilliant guy and from whom I have learned a lot. He made an excellent point the other day, which I have not heard anybody else make. But according to him, if you're going to send a tactical nuclear device at Ukraine, the way that the Russians would do it is they'd put it on an Iskander missile. Well, if it's on an Iskander missile, they only have a limited range. And that range is inside of ATACMS range and Storm Shadow range. And so if you give the Ukrainians authorization to use Storm Shadows and Scalps and ATACMS inside of Russia, suddenly everything gets pushed back outside of Iskander range too, and that means you have essentially neutralized the whole threat of a tactical nuclear strike. Now that to me is something that people should be shouting from the walls, right? Like just screaming. Give them long-range strike capabilities and we neutralize the threat of a tactical nuclear strike. That's important. That's critical. So Webadeb, here's the thing. These tactical nukes, these small, I say small nukes, smaller battlefield nuclear devices in the 4 to 7 kiloton range that the Russians have, they need a mechanism for launch. They don't just launch automatically. They're a warhead. You have to put them on something. And what the Russians use are Iskander missiles. The Iskander missile has its own limitation, its own range. And that range is less than the range of ATACMS and Storm Shadows. And so if you say, Ukraine, you can use Storm Shadows and ATACMS inside Russia, anywhere that they could launch an Iskander with a nuclear warhead is now within range of your missiles, is now a target that can be blown up before it's launched. No, Maddie, it's still not official. Does that make sense? No, Iskander missiles can also be topped with a conventional warhead, and both the Iskander M and the Iskander K are commonly fired against Ukraine. Oh, well, thanks, Maddie, right? Well, here we are. The most likely candidate for launching a tactical nuclear device at Ukraine would be an Iskander K, if I'm not mistaken. There's two principal models, the K and the M. And now this is according to Hamish de Breton Gordon, who you can listen to talk about this since he's the expert. Anybody that's interested in the details on this, I would encourage you to listen to the Ukraine the Latest podcast from, when was he on talking about this? Either Thursday or Friday of this week. And if you just look, he was only on one of those days. So if you just look at Ukraine the Latest podcast for Thursday and Friday and see which one featured Hamish de Breton Gordon, it's him talking about it there. That'll give you the details. Yeah, Hamish de Breton Gordon. No word, Nightshade. You know, like I said, don't expect a big announcement. I believe, it's my opinion, and we're in the realm of opinion here. I want to stress that strongly. Based on the conversations I've seen analysts having and what they're saying out there, it's my opinion that the US and the UK have given Kyiv the green light to use long-range missiles. However, they have not made the announcement in the hopes of maintaining some element of surprise on behalf of the Ukrainians. It's not going to work. The Russians are all, I think the Russians know, because the reports are that the Russians have moved 95% of all airplanes that were within strike range. They have now been moved away. Yet, Michael, I think that it is not official, right? There's nothing official about this, but I do believe that they have been given the okay, and that in the next couple of weeks, we're going to see those missiles fly. And right now, they're probably putting together the high priority target list. They're planning how they're going to exhaust Russian air defense before those missiles go out to make sure that they hit their targets. They're planning the operational phase of this now, would be my guess. And we'll see them fly in the next couple of weeks. I think so. I think that the day that they fly, you will see Macron, Starmer, and Biden all make speeches talking, rah-rah, cheerleading for Ukraine, and saying that they did it with authorization from their allied partners. What will those missiles do? They will go kaboom. They will go kaboom inside of Russia on airfields, logistics hubs, and ammo depots and fuel storage depots that currently the Ukrainians can't hit because they don't have the authorization to use those long-range weapons in Russia. What happened to Ukraine's long-range missiles that they developed? Now, Clay, if you're I don't know if you're talking about the S-200 missile program, the Neptune missile program, or the new ballistic missile program. The S-200, as I understand it, has limited functionality and use because they're pretty easy. The Russians have ways of shooting them down. They are not flexible in that regard. And so the S-200s have been used mostly to exhaust Russian air defense before things like the Neptunes and the Storm Shadows go in. It's worth mentioning that they only had 1,000 of those S-200s in the first place. And they've been pretty reliant on them for the last 2 years now. No, it's not that long, sorry. The first use of an S-200 we saw in June of 2023, so 14 months or so. The Neptunes, they have very limited numbers of them, as I understand it. And then the new ballistic missile program, they've only just announced that they've tested one. We don't know how many they have, if they have any, nor do we know what the production requirements look like or how long it'll be before they have any substantive number of them. That's my understanding on the Ukrainian homegrown missile programs. Okay. Yes, they will, Anthony. I believe that to be true. I believe that to be true. Well, Lars, you did it, pal. You're going to have arthritis over this, but you managed to hit 50,000. Congratulations. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Big thanks to all our sponsors and to the moderator team and the whole team here at Give Me a Minute. I'm Peter Alexievich. Thanks for being there for me. Because you are there for me, I can be here for you. Thanks, Simon. Take care, everybody. Good night, guys.